This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal.
Beards.
We love beards too. This is episode 422, Commerce Kickstart. On today's show, we're talking about Commerce Kickstart, commerce in general, and what's new at Centarro. With guest Ryan Szrama. We'll also cover navigation as our module of the week. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Our guest today is Ryan Szrama. Ryan has been working in Drupal since 2005, moving from helping sell hot dogs through the OG e-commerce module to leading the development of UberCart and Drupal Commerce. He co-founded Commerce Guys in 2009, which in 2016 split into companies Platform SH and Centarro, the latter of which he has run since then as the company behind Drupal Commerce. He's nearing the end of 2 terms as a Drupal Association board member. Thank you for that. And intends to use his newfound free time writing Roblox games. Ryan, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us.
You bet. I'm here solely to promote my budding Roblox career. So if you have any questions, let me know.
So we're gonna take a deviation down our first rabbit hole here. How did you sell hot dogs through e-commerce?
Well, have you ever been to Harry's New York bar in Paris?
No.
Oh,
No.
man. Okay, this is one of the best cocktail bars in Paris, and not necessarily because it has the best atmosphere, best drinks, depending on what you're looking for. But they invented the Bloody Mary, the French 75, Harry's Sidecar, the Boulevardier, which is a great cocktail that swaps the gin for whiskey out of a Negroni. And the only food you can buy there is a Nathan's Famous hot dog. I may have recently eaten them out of all of their Nathan's Famous hot dogs after DrupalCon Lille. And once upon a time, you could buy hot dogs direct to consumer from Nathan's Famous hot dogs using the e-commerce module. And I can't remember if it was like Drupal 4.6, 4.7, something early. But the work that I did was really just around, I think, UPS rate calculation and fulfillment at the time.
There you go. All right.
Now you
And
know.
I like how John is prepared and wore the Centarro t-shirt.
Hey, listen.
Ooh, nice.
So I have to say that this is one of my favorite t-shirts, not because I'm a Commerce fanboy. Well, maybe also because I'm a Commerce fanboy, but because of the purple color.
Yeah, you don't get too many purple. It's the purple stonewash. Really comfy.
This and my Gatsby shirt, both purple, can't get enough of them.
Mm-hmm.
So going back through our intros, you may or may not know that I'm John Picozzi, Solutions Architect at EPAM. And today, my co-hosts joining us for his third show, Mark Casillas, a Drupal tech lead at Canopy Studios.
Hello, and I'm still a little bit punchy from the flight back from Lille as well. So if I'm not off, I'm sorry. It's not that you're boring; it's that I'm nappy.
We're gonna rename
like
the
6
show.
For me, what is it, like 8 p.m. for you, Mark? Are you in New Mexico?
Yeah, so it's
We should have beers.
It was 8 hours, so
Yeah, I'm gonna go get a beer from the fridge. I'll join you.
We should rename the show Punchy Commerce Kickstart. And last but not least, Nick Laughlin, founder at Enlightened Development.
Happy to be here. Ready for the ride.
Did you introduce Martin?
Oh, that's coming up.
Oh, okay.
Have no fear. Here it comes right here. We're going to move into our module of the week where we bring in Martin Anderson-Klutz, a senior solutions engineer at Acquia and a maintainer of a number of modules of his own, to talk about our module of the week. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, John. Would you like to try out and give feedback on a proposed overhaul to how Drupal's administration menu works? There's a module for that. It's called Navigation, and it's a project that was originally created way back in 2004, but the namespace was taken over earlier this year as a place to work on the proposed new navigation in the contrib space. There are no releases yet, so you would have to clone the repo into your custom modules folder, but it is very active in terms of development. In fact, when I checked earlier today, the most recent commit was just in the past day. There are currently 46 issues open, 14 of which are bugs. And according to Drupal.org, there is officially one site using it, but it's not really something you would want to use in production anyway. The list of maintainers includes a number of folks that a lot of our listeners will recognize, like Christina Chimilis, Sasha Eggenberger, Lori Escala, Mike Herschel, and many others. Now, at this point, the module really provides kind of a prototype view of what the experience should be, and that's really sort of the point of the project at this moment in time. It's worth noting that the latest release for the Gin admin theme also includes this new updated navigation as an experimental feature that can be turned on, but it's still best to leave feedback on the navigation project. The main idea of the change is that instead of having dropdowns that fly out for deeper level menu items, the navigation is in a sidebar with menu items that expand to reveal child items when clicked. Now, it's also worth pointing out that drop-down menus with multiple levels handled in flyouts are a known usability pain point and are often cited by usability industry experts like Jacob Nielsen as something to avoid. There are still some usability issues to be thought through with the approach that's being worked on in the navigation project. For example, there is no longer a way to reach the top page of a section or subsection because clicking on the link shows or hides the child items instead. Now, this navigation project and the changes that are sort of being worked on within it were part of some very active discussions at DrupalCon Europe last week. So I thought it would be good to talk about it this week in our podcast so that our listeners can add their voices to the discussion.
I will
this
say
is actually what I printed on for Contrib Day was the navigation module as well. So
Nice.
Well, thank you for that those efforts. We appreciate the community.
Don't
Appreciate
thank me yet. My PR or my MR has been rejected so far, so I got to work on that.
Hey, listen, you tried. That's the first step. I will say when Martin brought this up, I was super excited because I watched the Dries note from Lille, and I will say it was wildly entertaining. I recommend everybody go out and watch it. But this was one of the improvements that he was talking about coming to Drupal, and I was like, oh man, this is awesome. It actually made me want to go, talking about personal projects and free time. It made me want to go update my my personal site to Drupal 10 with the I already have the Gen admin theme, but update the Gen admin theme just so I could try the new menu structure. So super interested and excited about that.
Some interesting history in the revision history there. It looks like the module was originally started by Jeremy Andrews, the CEO of Tag One Consulting, as like,
Oh,
I
really?
guess what became the menu system in Core or something like that. That's
Wow.
neat.
Yeah, this might be one of the oldest namespaces that I've seen on Drupal.org. I mean, 2004,
Yeah.
that's almost 20 years, other than some core modules, like I'm sure Node or something, but I've never looked at those specific pages because they're all part of core now. Oh, fascinating.
I will say that because we're talking about it, it makes sense, but like navigation as a namespace is not very clear as to what it does for me, which I mean, it's hard. Module naming is hard, but
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't call it admin toolbar, obviously, or admin menu, obviously.
they should have called it admin toolbar 2. That would have been way more. That would have been way
NG.
clearer.
Admin toolbar 2, the electric boogaloo. Yeah.
Choices.
Well, speaking of admin toolbar, there actually the BOF that I went to that was specifically about these navigation changes actually had a couple of the folks from the admin toolbar project there, and they seemed quite interested in sort of collaborating and making sure that the functionality provided by admin toolbar will work kind of seamlessly with some of these navigation changes. So great to see that collaboration is kind of already underway.
Well, it makes sense. How many times is the first? How many sites have you stood up where the first module you install is admin toolbar? I mean,
Always.
so having this ability in there, out of the box just makes so much sense. It's like, when views went into core, it's just like, oh, of course, that was the first thing you installed, at that point. Now,
I mean, like, how often do you go to look for something in the navigation too, and you're like, which menu is that in, right? Like, now it's going to be like a lot easier for you to see kind of like what's going on there because it's all right on the screen as opposed to hidden in drop downs. So, yeah, I think overall this is positive. Yeah, I will say even the design of it and everything looks really interesting. So excited to see how that progresses over time. But as Martin said, you can go and kick the tires on it and provide feedback and do all those fun things right there in the contrib space. So,
or even do like Mark and be part of making it better.
Yes,
it's true.
And with every complaint you have, that is a contribution in the waiting, to quote Greggles.
And there you go. Well, Martin, as always, thank you for bringing us another very enlightening module of the week. All right, let's move into our primary topic. So this episode is kind of long in coming because I got the idea for it from DrupalCon Pittsburgh, which was all the way at the beginning of the year, and sometimes these things take a little longer than I would like for me to get to. But Ryan, you did a talk at DrupalCon Pittsburgh titled "Selling File Downloads and Certificates Through Drupal Commerce." It was great. It was a great talk about how to kind of take that process and do those things in Drupal Commerce. Now, I know, because I'm a Commerce fanboy, that you've been able to kind of do that in Commerce for a while. So that part of it, I was kind of like, okay, let's see what the new latest and greatest was. But what I didn't know was how far Commerce Kickstart had come along as a starter kit and like a demo tool for Commerce. And that's what really kind of got me excited. So much so I went back to my hotel room after that talk, that night, and then installed Commerce Kickstart and was up and running with something within, like, I don't know, probably 10 minutes or less, if I had to guess. But let's just, for those listeners that may not know, can you give us a high level overview of what Commerce Kickstart is?
Sure. How far back do I go? Should I just focus on like the current version?
Yeah, let's focus on like the here and now, because
Okay.
I think back in the day it might have been a little bit different than it is now, and now it seems so much more accessible and easy to use.
Yeah, so I think the positive, this is what it is statement of Commerce Kickstart today is that Commerce Kickstart is the starting point, ideally a starting point for any Drupal commerce project. We call it the fastest way to start building on Drupal commerce. And the reason that we're focused on that initial developer experience, site building experience, what have you, is that there's a lot of stuff in commerce that you have to configure if you're just rolling from scratch. There's a lot of dependencies you have to manage. Thankfully, obviously, Composer nowadays does all that hard work for us. But just to get from like a blank Drupal site to having a fully functional store, if you're left to your own devices, it would take you a long time. You have to mostly just find out the things you don't know yet, right? So you might go try to create a product and realize that you might need the custom field. Where does that custom field go? Does it go in the product type, product variation type? And then you hit the add product button and you're like, oh, wait, I don't have any stores defined yet. Okay, I got to go set up a store now. What about currencies? What about all these things that you have to have in place in order to start using Drupal Commerce? And there's just some gotchas, just because that's the way that the Drupal is. There's gotchas. But what's even more challenging is if you're coming from a context where you start a new e-commerce project and your history is, I've launched a Shopify store, I've launched a BigCommerce site, I've installed Magento, I've used whatever. like the whole like scope of those applications is just the e-commerce, and everything is aligned around an e-commerce site right out of the box. Whereas a Drupal site, if you just install Drupal on its own, there's going to be nothing in Drupal that assumes you're going to have a grid-based faceted search interface for products with price comparisons and sorting and all that stuff. It won't know that you need a node layout that shows, say, a product image beside the product details and add to cart button. And so what Commerce Kickstart does is just gives you all of this default configuration, templates, recipes to follow, to simplify these aspects of creating an online store with Drupal Commerce. And I would say, like, really, like the target goal would be, it's as easy to use Commerce Kickstart and start a new store as it would be to go sign up for Shopify and start working your way through their configuration. And the last thing that it includes is like a full demo store. So if you went to, I think it's commerce.demo.centarro.io, that's just Commerce Kickstart. All of the product content, the landing pages, the search interface based on Search API, the various product types, product display types, the John, what you saw in Pittsburgh, the ability to sell file downloads, like all of that is just Commerce Kickstart with the Commerce Demo module. And Commerce Demo is really just, at this point, I think, just default content.
So
that's it. So all of the configuration comes from Kickstart, and then Commerce Demo will use that configuration to populate a complete store. So you literally can just, like you said, go through the installation process, and in 5 to 10 minutes have a running local copy of our demo store on your machine, and then you can expand upon it, reverse engineer it as needed. I'll pause. Questions, yeah.
So is Commerce Kickstart then a Drupal distribution? Because I think it is, and Drupal distributions used to be pretty common, but is that how it's implemented?
Yeah. I saw that as we were preparing for this call and the agenda, that question, and I think the answer is yes, kind of, I guess, because it's certainly on Drupal.org as an installation profile. And once upon a time, Drupal.org would package up your installation profiles into a single downloadable that then functioned like what we considered to be a Drupal distribution. And that is what Commerce Kickstart 2 was. It was a distribution of Drupal. One download button that you click, and you go to the installer, and it's just Commerce Kickstart. But frankly, like, things just don't work the same way anymore. Not only do I think Drupal.org cannot fully package up a distribution anymore, because of the way that it's implementing Composer and everything. I could be wrong on that. Forgive me, Tim and others at the DA, if I'm wrong. But we don't really want that, right? We want people basically starting from a certain starting point, but then when they go to maintain their site, I don't want them to have to wait for the next tagged release of Commerce Kickstart to get the latest code. And that was a problem in the distribution model of the past. Yeah. So Commerce Kickstart 2.x had like 200 modules in it or something stupid like that. And if we didn't go tag a new release with an update, like you couldn't have it.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, that's nice because it does let you as a distribution maintainer ensure kind of like the functional integrity of the whole. So if I update my MailChimp module, it's not going to break something because it added a new dependency that had to be considered. So that's nice, but it came with drawbacks, right? Like, well, what if like the link module had a security release? And oh yeah, we used the link module for the custom menu implementation. Okay, now Commerce Kickstart is insecure forever. Whereas, we're just used to maintaining Drupal sites by running Composer update, running your install hooks, and there you go. That said, like the one thing that we still like don't know exactly how it's going to play out over time. So we'll see. The nice thing about a distribution, or the model of the Drupal 7 distributions, is I think most of them settled on features as the way to maintain your configuration. And so long as like a feature was unedited, you could continue to roll out new features to the feature with each successive minor update. But if I have default configuration that I ship with a module or I ship with an installation profile, And then I change that default configuration in the subsequent point release. Well, your site doesn't care. There is no like diff it, see what's different, and now apply the configuration changes to my site because I've happened to have updated. But we'd like to get there. And what that means, that's a bit abstract. Sorry for folks listening. But
Well, so that kind of means, is there a push so that that's kind of where recipes is trying to go. So is there a push for Commerce Kickstart to move to recipes once it's fully supported?
I don't know. I think that's an idea, but it's not one that I've personally explored. Part of the problem there will be that the default configuration elements that we're using right now in Commerce Kickstart come from submodules of the profile itself. And so we can't have a recipe depend on one of those submodules because a site may not have been built on Commerce Kickstart. But maybe if a site was built on Commerce Kickstart, the recipe system could know, like, these are legitimate recipes for that distro. I don't know. I haven't really explored that. I think I know there should be like a commerce recipe for like just grabbing Drupal commerce and its various accoutrements, since we're still French. But I don't know.
Yeah.
What it
It
would look
almost
like.
seems it almost seems like the recipe would really maybe be the commerce demo, right? Where you're like, oh, I need a set a config for a demo instance. Let me pull this recipe and install it. And that's where instead of having that module package, you have a recipe that just kind of does what it needs to do to put that in place. And then somebody could
maybe. Well, John, can you tell me? Because I think you're involved somewhat in the recipes initiative, right? Or is that Project Browser?
Oh no. I literally am in Project Browser once every 3 to 6 months.
Got it. Okay.
But
what I don't know is, like, does the recipe initiative have a solution for managing configuration updates, especially if a site has customized the configuration entities that are coming
no
from
is
a
the
recipe?
short answer there. So recipes are basically a starting point, right? So somebody would say, hey, let me take the commerce demo recipe and let me take the commerce demo recipe and drop it into my site and run it. And then now I have all I need in order to be
functional.
We have like a proto recipe system, meaning we were just building something for us, not really trying to establish a pattern. So because we already had our thing going, we then didn't glom on to the recipe initiative as quickly as maybe we would have if we were starting today. But you basically have these submodules that define store elements. So we have different product types. If you want to sell a physical product versus a downloadable product, we have submodules that define those product and product variation types. And then Commerce Demo just knows if those modules exist on this site to import the default content that you might want to demo with that. We have other submodules that are like a taxonomy-based catalog that just uses taxonomy terms and core search. And we have a more turbocharged one that's based on Search API. And so when you're in the installer, you can either click a button if you've added the Commerce Demo module to your site to install a full demo store, or you get a list of all of the different submodules that you might want to enable. And those submodules are primarily just default configuration that gets installed when that module is installed. But like my vision and my goal was to say, okay, like, let's say you really are just launching a very basic Drupal commerce site, a Commerce Kickstart store, and you just have physical products. You're not going to do much to them at all. But eventually we decide, you know what, like, it's kind of dumb to not have the meta tag module be a core part of Commerce Kickstart, because anybody who's running an online store really should have meta tag enabled, whatever. So if I wanted to add meta tag to a product type that was already installed on this site, you don't have, like, I can't just update the install config for that submodule and then that automatically get applied to the related config entities that are now part of that site's configuration. But if I can diff the site's configuration of a product type against the configuration of the previous version of that submodule, and it's the same, then I can say, oh, cool, it's safe for me now then to like basically add these things to it, to add meta tag to it. So in other words, what I want is this path where someone could install one of our submodules, never touch those configuration elements, and then continue to receive updates as we put them into those submodules. And so what that means, though, is that like if you wanted to add custom features to a product type that we give you from a submodule, well, frankly, you probably should just clone it and use your own. You know, that's the simplest path, really.
So,
Yeah.
So a question, right?
Yeah.
Commerce Kickstart seems like a great starting point, right? Demo site. If you were like, oh, let me show you what Drupal Commerce can do, like here's a great example. I'll use Commerce Kickstart to get that off the ground running quickly, right? What I'm wondering though is Commerce is a separate module, or I guess it's a little bit of a grouping of modules, right, to run Commerce. In what cases or what instances might someone say, I'm just going to use Commerce directly as opposed to using Kickstart?
Yeah. You know, thanks to Composer, like any competent developer can just do that. Composer, install Drupal/Commerce, whatever. What you get out of Kickstart as a developer would be like kind of like a guarantee, I guess, that any of the modules that we're going to kind of put into your code base have been maintained to like the same standard of care as like Commerce Core, and some opinions about what additional things you might want to have in your project. So that's so like a project that's already going, just add Commerce and whatever else you want. A project that's just starting today could theoretically still use Commerce Kickstart and just not install any of the default configuration, because at that point it's really the same in nature as the what is it, the Drupal core Composer project template. And to go back to the next question, like that's what Commerce Kickstart is. It is a Composer project template, not technically a Drupal distribution, but we made our template such that once you've installed it, we're not locking you into our opinions. So even though we include modules, for example, by default that we think are good and ready to be used, if you don't need them on your site, we don't lock you into that. And you know, one example I gave, I think, at that talk in Pittsburgh, John, is the one project template to be useful for developers who know what they're doing and don't want all the things, and for simple site builders or simple site building, is we kind of have like a little bit of an abstraction layer in our dependency chain. So all of the what we call like Centarro certified projects that we throw into Commerce Kickstart, like Commerce License, Commerce Shipping, modules that we maintain that expand the Commerce feature set but aren't part of Commerce Core, we bring those in through a third-party project called, I think it's like Centarro/certified projects or something. It's just a Composer library that we maintain on Packagist. And so if your site doesn't need all that stuff and you're a developer and say, well, I don't want anything going onto my production server that I'm not using, well, then once you've created a project from that project template, you then just remove that group dependency and then re-add the individual projects from that you want. And so the idea here is that, like, if we had made Commerce License a dependency of Commerce Kickstart and you used the Commerce Kickstart installation profile, then you could never uninstall Commerce License from your code base. Even if you never installed it in Drupal, it would still be in the code base. And, you know, I think depending on people's security consciousness, I mean, like having code on the web server is a liability, even if it's not supposed to ever be used, right? We know this from the WordPress plugin world, right? Like somebody could go, I mean, tomorrow, put on my black hat, I could go buy probably 5 WordPress plugins that all have 10,000 users each and add a backdoor script into those projects and then push out updates, and nobody would be any the wiser. That's happened. And so you don't want that happening, you know, if you don't actually.
By no means are we suggesting that any of our listeners go and do that. We're just saying that there could
no. But if so that's like they basically tried to make it so that like we could use it internally when we launch a new project that's not going to use any of the Kickstart feature set.
So you still use Kickstarter internally?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
so
go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna say I'm glad we're talking about this because I'm in the process of like finishing touches on a commerce project, and we're upgrading from a Drupal 7 commerce Kickstart project, and we explicitly didn't use Kickstart because I think in 7 it was a little bit more opinionated. It was more of like a traditional
very, very much so.
distribution.
Yeah.
So we were a little
That's
concerned
terrible,
about
man.
that. So hey,
So
live
many
and learn.
opinions in there.
So
it was good for the time, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it was great for then. So are there any, if you use it internally for everything, are there any cases you would say somebody shouldn't use Commerce Kickstart?
Honestly, like I'd say that most agencies and probably many freelancers and solopreneurs, if you will, have a starter kit that they use on every project. Like we discussed earlier, right, Mark? Like admin toolbar, it's on every project. So if you don't want to have to retype in composer install admin toolbar every time you go start a new project, most of us end up with whatever the agency / what Drupal project name is. I'm sure most, if not all, agencies have this, because you need a standard way of starting a new project if you're trying to sell your services. So look at what it has to offer, and if that's good enough, then roll with it. The other advantage is that we're kind of making that commitment. Like the projects that are included here will be maintained to the same standard of care as Commerce Core. So at the very least, you can say before you go fetch a new project off of Drupal.org to build your site, you can at least see, okay, well, does Centarro think this is a good idea or not? That's not to say there aren't good projects on Drupal.org that we don't maintain, but we may not be able to guarantee it. And then finally, and this, we haven't realized this potential yet, and I can't remember if it was part of my talk in Pittsburgh or not, but like my goal would be simpler migrations. So in other words, if Commerce Kickstart 2.x is the source, and then Commerce Kickstart 3.x is the destination, we can actually create reusable migrate plugins or migrate configurations that handle that source to that destination. But it's a bit harder if you don't know what the destination looks like. Everybody has to create those migrate configurations themselves or whatever.
Yeah, I will say the profiles and legacy orders, that migration was, I mean, we basically flattened a lot of that data and migrated it as like a legacy, so we can have like a legacy portal so the client can go back and look at stuff. But yeah,
we've done that a lot. Yeah. Like I asked the clients, I say, hey, look, like we can do a 1-for-1 data migration for you. How much money do you really want to spend on this? Okay, what data can we leave behind? Because they don't need it all. At the very least, you don't need it all in the same shape that it's in Drupal Commerce. Like if I can just add a log. So in Drupal Commerce 2, we have this concept of an activity log on orders. That's where things like state changes are monitored. We don't use revisions anymore for various reasons. But if I can just add an additional log whenever that migration happens, that just kind of has the pertinent information from the previous order and save 2 months of migration writing, then it's probably better for the client.
I'm glad to know I made the right decision there architecturally, because I was looking at migrating orders and I was like, this is going to take months. Let's do a legacy. But interesting.
Is there a something? Is there a certain type of commerce site that Commerce Kickstart lends itself, or is it pretty much a nice blanket?
Yeah. Well, so I'll say basic catalog stuff, right? Basic physical product sales with a nice, attractive visual catalog where you have good images for everything. Totally fine out of the box, just to rock and roll. We do have Commerce License in there now. In fact, one of the main reasons we don't actually have the 3.0.0 tagged yet was we were waiting for the Commerce License full release, which just happened over the summer. And so now we're ready to move that forward again. But if you're selling file downloads, I think it's a great starting point for that. We wanted to be able to support like membership and recurring billing use cases, but frankly, we just de-scoped it for the sake of getting something launched. But that's why in Pittsburgh, my session was really focused on that file download, certificate sales use case.
And it's done a lot with like reoccurring payments and subscriptions for a while, right?
Well, Commerce has, but Kickstart doesn't have like default opinions on that, if you will. Yeah. So I mean, we have many recurring billing clients on Drupal Commerce, but you wouldn't be able to just get that out of the box in Commerce Kickstart today.
Got it. Interesting. So we've talked about a couple of other services, right? Shopify, BigCommerce, those sorts of things, right? I'm wondering. we may not be able to answer this question. We'll see. But I'm wondering how you feel Drupal Commerce and Commerce Kickstart kind of stack up to some of those solutions. More specifically, like Shopify, right?
Yeah. I mean, like the simple answer, of course, is like there's no contest. I mean, Shopify has $5 billion to advance their platform. And they got to a point where most of their innovation today happens around the edges or around the customer experience, meaning they're an app marketplace. All of the innovation happens through third-party app developers working in their ecosystem, but all those companies have a built-in business model by being in the app store to do things. Shopify as a company is a payments company. Like most of their money comes from merchant services, comes from lending their merchants money and getting interest from them. It comes from the transaction fees from the gross transaction volume on their platform. Like this is all public in their filings with the SEC. So just technically speaking, like there's no way we can compete with such a behemoth. However, right, like you always want to find, who would really want this? And that's what we try to focus on. It's like, okay, like the feature set that we have is good enough for most merchants who don't want to end up competing with their platform provider. All right. So, and that's a bit of a marketing spin, right? But like, it is true that if you sell on Shopify, they're going to use your data to push other people's products, oftentimes your direct competitors. And the example that I use, is my friend's coffee roaster, Methodical Coffee here in South Carolina. I bought coffee from his website. I love them. I support them. And I got credit for using ShopPay, $1.47 in credits now or whatever. So then now Shopify sends me push notifications from the ShopPay app for other people's coffee I might be interested in. Oh, and those other companies are part of a promotional program where we will 10x your shop dollars. So I can go get $15 off on, I don't know, Black Rifle Coffee or whoever else is selling on there, which means like Methodical Coffee is paying a big monthly fee to Shopify to now promote their competitors' products to their every customer. So when you think about like, how do I stack things up? I say, cool, like Drupal Commerce will never do that. But also,
isn't that one of the magical lands in the Dries Note fairy tale?
Yes. Yeah.
So
wait, good callback there, Mark. Yeah, I think folks, if you haven't stopped this episode now, go listen to the Dries Note. Come on back, and we'll still be here. Ryan, I think you raise an interesting point there, right? So like, I don't know that people tend to realize when they go to a solution like Shopify, and I would say that Shopify is great if you're a small brick and mortar store that needs to get online, or you may not be you may not be able to support infrastructure and developers and people to kind of build you a Drupal Commerce or a Commerce Kickstart site, right? So like Shopify has a use case there, but I think for larger organizations that are looking at e-commerce, like that's an interesting point to you have to pay Shopify for their services, right? Not that implementing Drupal is free. We all know that's not the case, but it's not, there's not a licensing fee or a monthly payment there. And then you're not also necessarily providing them permission or the ability to kind of like promote other people
yield your data against you.
right. Like, so like your coffee example is a great one, right? So I think that's an interesting consideration for folks.
Yeah. And I think the honest fact is that most merchants don't really care. Otherwise there wouldn't be a bajillion Shopify sites. There just wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Right.
The cost to them of that is lower than the cost of paying somebody to build them a custom e-commerce website.
Sure.
We want to reduce the cost of building someone a custom e-commerce website, but it will never be zero. But I think too, like what does get obscured is the fact that most Shopify sites of any appreciable complexity have their own build cost. You're hiring a Shopify agency to go implement some custom template for you and learn the JavaScripty templating language that Shopify has, to write custom Shopify apps for you, to do the integrations that they don't support, or to add the features they don't have. So like it's not that different. There are still some things that would be nice if they were easier. So like I can go install Commerce Kickstart right now, but I still have to know that such a thing as a payment gateway exists. If you just launch on Shopify, you're collecting payments immediately as soon as you go live. Very different, right? And so we could, for example, embed payment gateway modules into Commerce Kickstart that have simple one-click get me started things, like whether that's PayPal's merchant onboarding or Stripe Connect or something like that. But typically, that's like in the case of Shopify, if you're using Shop Pay, like they've certified you and have granted you that merchant account. They're now willing to just kind of green light your payments onboarding, whereas it could be just a little more scarier to work with a third party to get that all sorted out. I don't know. But the other nicer thing, and we discussed this earlier, like because they are just providing a purpose-built e-commerce application, like the back end is just a lot cleaner. So I mean, like you have the full, like really like almost the same, if not better, product management capabilities out of Drupal Commerce out of the box as you would get on Shopify. In some ways, much better. We for example, do things like structure the concept of a SKU with a product variation, whereas Shopify still uses that Uber cart style, like toggle on all your options, and then you can get this form and try to tap in all your SKUs and hope nobody ever changes anything and you lose your SKU. We support unlimited product attributes, whereas in Shopify, I'm pretty sure it's still just 3. But again, most merchants don't care about that stuff. Yeah. So what they do care, though, is that when they go into manage orders, everything like the back end is just I'm managing my store, whereas the back end of Drupal Commerce is still I'm managing my Drupal site. And that's just it's like one step removed. It's a bit abstract. Our order management interface needs to be better. Right now, it's just kind of painful to like manage the order items on an order. If I could pick one place to wave a wand and magically improve it, it would be that order management UI, specifically for editing orders. I think we're actually pretty solid for like viewing, managing, customer servicing orders. But if you're trying to edit an order, there are some gaps there.
So like even one of the things my client just discovered the other day is like you can add items and create a cart for somebody. That's not a lot. Like if you have a customer that's having trouble finding the right item, you just edit their cart and add all the items. But you're right. It's a little clunky, but
it's painful.
But it works. Like it's better than the past.
Yeah.
I'd like to point out before the next question that you have a buddy that runs a coffee business, and I've yet to see you at a coffee bath. Just gonna lay that out.
My bad. I should bring his coffee. It's really good. They've been on it lately with these more experimental Colombian producers, that are doing things and generating flavor profiles like in the past I've only ever seen in like natural processed coffees out of Ethiopia, Costa Rica. But stuff like this one coffee was basically double anaerobic fermented. The secondary fermentation involved an inoculation of yeast from a beer production. So it's like they call it an IPA washed coffee it was just the IPA varietal of this coffee. And so it had hops and this yeast inoculation put into the secondary fermentation. And I swear it was like I had it as a cortado, and the aftertaste was like Fruity Pebbles milk. That kind of like generically limey, citrusy sort of flavored milk. Like that's what the cortado tastes like. It was fantastic.
So for our listeners,
I should join the coffee buff. I could go long on that.
For our listeners, we'll have a link in the show notes to Ryan's Friends Coffee, so that way you too can order it and try it yourself.
Absolutely.
Look up Sebastian Ramirez. I'll list off all my favorites from their site right now.
Okay, so switching gears a little bit, both from the coffee and from the previous question. I'm curious about commerce itself. So as I mentioned, I'm working on a commerce site right now, and the client had a requirement where pricing for particular products was different depending on the role.
Cool.
And I got ready to kind of just write some custom code, but we had recently had Jürgen Haas on to talk about ECA, and I remember, rules has always felt like one of the big missing pieces in Drupal 8 Plus.
Yeah.
And ECA is not, listen to the show. It's way more complex and powerful. I decided to just write an integration between ECA and Commerce. And so right now it only has a couple of actions, the ability to reset a price. But it pulls all the default conditions and action events from Commerce. So
Nice.
my question is, this is a little, I guess, maybe selfish, but also it helps the community. But I'm curious about what's the process for getting like additional, conditions or something in Commerce Core. For example, I was recently trying to figure out how to check if a user had a cart, and there's no like condition that Commerce Cart provides that says like this
Interesting.
user has a cart or more carts, because users can have more than one cart. Is that the kind of thing that it's on the roadmap somewhere? Just
No, I mean, honestly, it'd be a great
and
feature
be
request for
reviewed.
the issue queue. Yeah.
Yeah, happy to do
Yeah.
that. But I'm curious, like what kind of process is there for that? Like, do you guys kind of rely on the community for those types of feature requests at this point because it's kind of stable, or do you kind of still have brainstorm sessions where like, hey, what are we missing? What are the gaps, and try to fill those in?
So you have there's 3 threads that I'm going to try to follow up to in reverse chronological order. Okay.
I'm so sorry. That was
it was there's the two previous 2 of the threads are things that you didn't directly ask. So I'll answer your direct question first, and then I'll work my way backwards. The simple answer to that is that we add new conditions to Commerce Core when we have clients that need them, and we say this would be good for everybody to use. Why don't we just make this a generic one, patch it, and put it in the next release? So the process for anybody else would look very similar. Like, oh, I'm going to write this thing for my client. If I just make it generic enough that anybody could use it, I can throw a patch in the Commerce Core issue queue, and we can get it integrated. To be in Commerce Core, that means it's going to have some test coverage. So that's a little bit of an extra burden on, say, just a typical project budget, maybe. But testing a new condition shouldn't be that hard, and I'm sure there are templates for doing so in the promotions module at the very least. Either that, or I'm wrong, and we just don't have test coverage for those. In which case, fine, just throw a patch. So we do have pretty broad coverage for most things that we think people will need for promotions, for shipping method or payment gateway availability, for tax applicability, because most of these things are just kind of dependent on aspects of an order or of a billing or shipping profile. So where is it shipping to? What user role does the owner have? What's the total order value, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What taxonomy terms are applied to a product? That kind of thing. But there's always going to be stuff that we haven't foreseen or just even thought about. So, does this person have a cart or not, or another cart, or a cart for a different store even? Those are all interesting things, right? Because like you said, you can have multiple carts in commerce. Each one could represent a different store. And maybe I want to offer somebody a discount when they buy from multiple vendors at the same time, whatever that would look like. Who knows? But so that just begins in the commerce issue queue. And if you don't get any traction from us there, because there's frankly a lot of issues, a lot of people contributing in there and doing work in there, then we're pretty active in the commerce channel in Drupal Slack. So if we don't see it, or if you just want to get some eyes on it, is this going in the right direction? Pinging us in there, or even just the community in general. I'm on there all day, every day. You see me there throughout this morning even. So it's hopefully we're not that hard to get a hold of. But right now, our core internal discussions around core improvements are more around our frustrations with the payment API, limitations with the model of payments entities right now. Or the kind of intricacies that arise between a payment gateway plugin and a stored payment method, when that gateway might create payments of multiple different method types. So the Stripe gateway supporting credit card, mobile wallet, Affirm, Cash App, Venmo payment methods. how do I manage that within one module? So that's where a lot of our future thinking is going toward. But like conditions aren't like those are pretty low hanging fruit. I think if you had a good idea, I think that we'd get it thrown in pretty quickly. To go back one step, thinking about ECA in general, I actually did have a good conversation with Jürgen about this at DrupalCon Lille. So we talked at some length about the status of the module, his desire for me to take a look at it and see about making a more official integration supported. The reason that didn't happen, like you said, is that, well, rules just didn't exist and we needed commerce to be done. So we skipped rules, but we also replaced it with kind of more natively embedded conditional interfaces within Drupal Commerce that we believe better serve the average merchant. So that's always going to be the challenge with like an ECA, is like the same problem with rules. Like unless you were a programmer, you could not create a rule.
well, that's the nice thing about the ECA, both how Jürgen kind of architected ECA and how you architected Commerce, is like my plugin, obviously I'm creating the custom action. So there's kind of some actions that probably are missing that people would expect. But we have drivers for the conditions. So if you provide a condition, it's automatically available to, although there's a couple of exceptions, but in general, the conditions are always available. The events we have to manually listen for because ECA has to kind of intercept them and act on them. But there's, the most of the engineering went into how do we handle these events without making sure that Commerce Cart is installed, right? Because we only want to listen to Commerce Cart when it's there. And if you try to listen to an event that doesn't exist, all hell breaks loose.
But again, like the bigger issue to me is who does it actually serve? And this is not a knock on ECA. It was my same challenge with rules, and I love rules. So we advanced rules quite a bit. We used it all throughout the Commerce One ecosystem. But it doesn't serve the end user, the merchant who has to go configure a promotion or a pricing system or a shipping method availability. Like it doesn't serve them because they'll be lost in that user interface. And it doesn't, like, I think it can serve like a site builder developer or a developer who just has simple requirements and would like a visual record in the back end of Drupal of what custom things might be firing. But none of the developers on my team have ever asked for a user interface to do that kind of thing. They would just write an event subscriber and write the code that they need. They would write a custom price resolver. They would write a custom order processor before they would ever reach for a UI-based tool to do the same.
I think we have to get them to focus more on the ambitious site builder and what their needs might be.
Maybe. Well, and Jürgen did tell me that like ECA can process these configured what do they call them? Rule sets?
The BPMNI. I mean, it integrates with BPMNI, so you can. A lot of businesses will use that language to write out their logic. Import that stuff.
So it's like theoretically, the promotions module could produce those outputs, so we could actually keep our own user interface and then use ECA for the actual processing of those rules, which would be interesting. I'm open-minded. Finally, I'd like to go back one more thread, just so I don't miss it. If you wanted to give custom prices per roles, you could have used the price list module. But if you couldn't use the price list module for some reason, you may have had other ways to accomplish the same thing. That's all I was going to say. Either promotions can support in Commerce Core like a fixed percentage amount off based on the user's role. The price list module can support any kind of arbitrary pricing and then be configured per role or per date or per region, whatever. There's a lot of ways you can filter that. But I will admit, like the UI for managing the prices in the price list may not have been ideal for what you needed. So
that kind of raises the other issue with the Commerce ecosystem. It's kind of a sub problem of the Drupal ecosystem in general. Is you have to know about the module to use it, and I couldn't find it. So
because if you're searching role-based pricing, price list doesn't sound like the thing that you need. So maybe we need to find a way in the actual UI of Drupal Commerce to recommend the module. Like, do you need more complex pricing than what you have here? Check these out.
It feels like Project Browser could help with that. Mark, what were you going to say?
Well, so I was gonna move on to speaking of ambitious site builders and interfaces. What do you think the state of headless, getting it completely out of there, is in commerce, specifically with Drupal Commerce and Kickstarter?
So our biggest European client is fully headless. It's a Drupal Commerce backend that functions like a private distribution for them that we've instantiated for their German site, for their Danish site, for their Swedish site, and so on. And they process a ton of transactions through that system. And the front end is a completely decoupled React app that they then also reproduce for each new environment, because certain things change market to market. What they depend on is largely available out of the box when you install the Commerce API module. However, there's always caveats with headless, because one, front end people don't want to work with JSON API. Commerce API is working through JSON API. And two, like, if a resource, like if it's not supported yet, like it's a lot of work to figure out how to make it supported through that ecosystem, I think. I struggle to work in that module space myself. Jonathan from our team, who's our lead developer, he's the primary person maintaining those. But we used to have like a headless demo site with like a basic React app as a template. That's gone. But next up on the roadmap for Commerce Kickstart 3.0 is to basically have you be able to pick the option in the installer. Do I want the full stack variant or the headless variant? And if you select the headless variant, then what you would get is just a back office and a schema doc for you to point to go navigate all your available API requests and so on. But you can build your product catalog, and we actually, when Matt Glanman was still working with us, did the whole ability to search a search API index over JSON API, so you can have a nice, beautiful product catalog. Shopping cart management is all there. Checkout is the point where I think going fully headless is hardest, because there's so much in the Drupal ecosystem that's dependent on the Forms API and on stepping through form submissions and so on. Like, you just lose all of that by going fully headless. But we do try to support the ability to progressively build out your order document from your custom app or your custom React components or whatever it is, and then also surface from the back end the things that app would need. So one example of that is that if you're using a JavaScript payment API, you often need a client token specific to that customer's browsing session that is generated server side. So use the server's secret keys to generate a client token that then gets passed to the front end to embed that PayPal iframe or Stripe iframe or whatever it is, Braintree iframes. And so, we enrich the order resource. So if I get an order, it just has pre-generated that token for me. So we're doing some early generation of these things. Other things that are a bit challenging are things like shipping. I can't remember how far we've gone in simplifying this, but when you add shipping to an order in Commerce, really what you're saying is this order has a shipments reference field, and the shipping address is a profile referenced by a shipment, referenced by an order. So you have these multiple layers of entities you have to end up creating. And I can't remember how far we've gotten in simplifying that or flattening that. I know,
it's not simple or flat.
Not very far. Okay, cool. There's the answer. Not cool that it's not simple, but cool that we know the answer. Yeah. So I think there's more work to be done there. Frankly, for our big European customer, we wrote a custom resource for that. And we also don't, their front enders don't want JSON API responses. I'm not sure if they're using JSON API at all at this point. Although they did fund all of our Commerce API work at the beginning and what became that module. I think we just slowly replaced it over time.
So
another problem there is this: caching individual requests. If they all go through the JSON API endpoint, then how do I cache the results, at Redis intelligently from a specific endpoint? Right? Anyways,
I want to say, before we move on, John, I just want to say I'm on this particular project. I am using Commerce API.
Okay.
But I'm not using. It's not a headless site. It's just a site that's using native web components, and the client has a really complex kit builder. Basically, there's a bunch of different parts that if you want this particular thing, you need these 10 parts. If you want this, you need these 5. And we just use the API to, when they finally make their selection, it just adds everything to the cart. And I have to say, it was, they actually check through the cart, check out of the cart like the normal way, like through Drupal. So I don't have to worry about the other side of it, but it made it very simple to just say, like, I need 3 of this variant ID, 4 of this variant ID, and 5 of this variant ID, and not have to worry about it.
Yeah. Nice.
So, Ryan, we can actually cut this question, if you like, from the end product. But I wanted to ask. I know at one point, Centarro was thinking of doing like a commerce like platform as a service offering, which I think was going to use kind of the headless, the API endpoints and all that stuff. Is that still something you guys are focusing on, or are you kind of shifting to Commerce Kickstart and like that's where we're going to put our energy and effort?
Yeah, so our goal would be for that headless variant, which would be like the next phase of Kickstart development, to kind of seed into fully managed headless commerce. We have clients that we do have multiple enterprise big brands, monthly subscription fee for headless commerce backend powered by Drupal Commerce. They don't even care that there's Drupal under the hood. They're buying Centarro Commerce subscriptions. And then we keep the lights on, and everything else is an implementation detail to them. They don't know, right? And we've, depending on who we're hosting with, in this case, a couple of them at least are on platform.sh. So we're able to say things like, our headless commerce backend can incorporate custom modules that are specific to your feature set. So when you want to reproduce this for the next site, it already connects to your ERP or your accounting system or whatever. And we can provide you with both a live and a test environment with different credentials for either one, blah, 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 blah. So we're already doing that. It's a pretty robust offering. We don't have it like very visible on Centarro.io just for lack of the time to focus on like, how do I market this?
Right.
But so I'd say it's definitely like still a goal, but it's not like, it hasn't been like a near-term priority just with everything else going on.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, we had discussions about that in Lille. Like, how do we get back to like putting this all together as Centarro Commerce? If you just want a simple hosted store, well, let us host and manage Commerce Kickstart for you. Oh, and by the way, we'll keep it up to date forever. And that's where our interest, our self-interest comes in making these kind of recipes be updatable. Or if you just want the headless variant, then you go on a different track. And if Kickstart doesn't have the feature set that you want, well, then maybe you move into the more robust
Customized
headless commerce version.
I see your marketing campaign right now, like, hey, Shopify is selling your customers your competitors stuff to your clients, but Centarro Commerce will never do that.
Yeah. Well, and again, like, think about how do you market Drupal? Like, I'm not going to put my feature set grid against theirs. But yeah, you look for these qualitative differences that means something to the right person. So in the healthcare industry, HIPAA compliance means something. Full first-party data ownership means something. And the ability to still function, as an e-commerce business. In other words, like I can't just say, well, I can't use Shopify because they can't give me the compliance that I need. So I'm going to accept the fact that I will never know anything about my customers and never be able to use modern data analytics to market to them and improve my sales. Like those are very opposite ends of the spectrum. There needs to be something that can do both. Like you own your data, and you also can still do data analysis, and you can still do marketing automation and things. Here's how. So I focus, those qualitative differences. And again, even for like a headless API, like a major qualitative difference using Drupal as the backend for your headless project, whether it's commerce or not, is that you have the ability to customize every data object. A native, like I can natively add new fields to the order model, new fields to the user model. And, in Shopify, as far as I know, you're limited in what you can do there. You end up with a bridge between like my custom app that adds this one thing to an order and the order data model as it exists in Shopify. So if I want to ever, say, create a new interface in my admin backend that collates that data, tough. I have to now create a third-party index that collates that data and then populate my view from that index. So the ability to fully own the data model and the architecture of what's behind the Commerce API is, a reason people will reach for, I think, Drupal Commerce as that backend provider versus something else, whether it's BigCommerce or Shopify or a purpose-built e-commerce backend.
I figured it out. Along with your Roblox efforts, now you're also going to join the newly founded Drupal marketing initiative to bring Drupal goodness to
Yeah,
the masses.
yeah.
Ryan, as
I've
always,
certainly been a part of those discussions at the board level, but they booted me out. So here we go. You know, they lose
there you go. Plenty of free time now, I'm sure. Well, Ryan, as always, thank you for joining us. It's been a super enlightening conversation. And it's always great to have you on.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Mark, Nick, everyone for having me.
Do you have questions or feedback? You can reach out to Talking Drupal on Twitter with the handle Talking Drupal or by email with show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on the Drupal Slack in the channel Talking Drupal.
You can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/TD promo.
And you can get the Talking Drupal newsletter to learn more about our guest hosts, show news, upcoming Drupal camps, local meetups, and much more. You can sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
Thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choosing that big Become a Patron button in the sidebar. All right, we have made it to the end of our show. This is the shameless self-promotion portion of our event here. Ryan, if folks wanted to get a hold of you, talk about Commerce Kickstarts, your food experiences in Lille, where would they do that?
Most accessible probably on just Twitter at Ryan Szrama or in the Drupal Slack's Commerce channel. I'm obviously around other places, but those are the primary ones.
Szrama, you say it so well. It's like it's been your,
I mean,
your
I got
name.
40 years.
Properly.
I do, and also, blog at ryanszrama.com, and of course, we have Centarro.io for more Drupal commerce business-oriented news.
I'm not going to lie. Every time I said it in my head, it sounded like that. Mark, if folks wanted to get a hold of you, how would they go about doing that?
So I am Marky on Drupal.org and Marky in Drupal Slack. That's usually the best way to get a hold of me. I do want to point out that the November 11th, my band is playing in Cedar Crest, New Mexico. So if you happen to be in the area, check out the Randomatics there.
Were you Marky in the Funky Bunch as well then? Is that?
I've never heard that one.
I know.
Oh, I don't think I've heard that one from you multiple times either.
Oh, I don't know that I've used that one yet.
We'll have to start a counter. Nick Laughlin, where can folks find you?
People can find me pretty much everywhere at Nick's Van, NICXVAN.
And I'm John.
As in, like, you live in a van or like?
No.
Oh,
no, okay.
Just someone.
It's funny because
that is a small room. That could be like a really pimped out camper van.
I often sometimes think when we get to this part of the show, I think of Nick driving a van, like the A-Team van, and like it's Nick's van.
Anyway. Nick Van down by the river.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Anyway. I'm John Picozzi, and you can find me on all the major social networks at John Picozzi, as well as Drupal.org. And you can find out about EPAM at EPAM.com.
And if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.